Chapter 82 Meals for the Neighbors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi arrived at the Wanda Mall in the economic development zone. All that was visible was the roof. He repeated his method, broke the glass, and used a climbing rope to haul himself inside. The mall interior still bore traces of its once bustling past. Inside the ring-shaped mall, each store displayed its wares. Expensive clothes, shoes, and various everyday items were now worthless, free for the taking. Zhang Yi targeted several useful stores, transferring their entire stock into his personal storage space. The supermarket was located on the basement level. After quickly gathering the supplies, he headed downstairs. As expected, the supermarket was still well stocked, likely due to its isolation, but the quality? Questionable at best. The blizzard had crushed part of the mall, letting freezing air seep in, frosting over the shelves. The cold had wrecked the food. Puffed snacks and cookies were covered in ice. The vegetable section was particularly bad. While not rotten, the produce was severely dehydrated, undoubtedly tasteless. The meat section fared better, frozen solid, authentic zombie meat. As for the fish tanks, they had burst from the freezing temperatures, so fresh fish was out of the question. Normally, this food would be destined for the trash, or maybe a food processing plant would take it, turning it into some ready-made dish. Zhang Yi shrugged. I'm not eating this garbage. He didn't even bother storing it in his space. He wasn't short on supplies, so why bother with this subpar stuff? But that wasn't the point. Even in this condition, this food would be a feast for neighbors who hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. Zhang Yi pulled out 2 large duffel bags from his space and tossed in some wilted vegetable leaves and zombie meat. He added some soggy bread and cookies. The bags filled up fast. Zhang Yi decided not to take anything else, leaving the rest for now. Maybe it would help someone else survive. He didn't need it. Finished. Zhang Yi checked his Rolex. It was a cold-resistant model, still ticking in the extreme temperatures. The time might not be exact, but it gave him a general idea. It read 3:30 p.m. The trip back to Uelu community would take about an hour. Zhang Yi didn't want to waste any time. He could always come back later. No one could compete with him, so he'd explore other places at his own pace. Zhang Yi left the supermarket with his scavenged goods and headed back on the snowmobile. By the time he reached Uelu community, it was dark. Boom! The engine noise was amplified in the quiet neighborhood. Windows in every building lit up with faces watching him. In apartment 26 on the 15th floor, Huang Tianfang, the leader of the Tianhe gang, narrowed his eyes at the brand new snowmobile. Half his face was burned, making him look even more menacing. He and a few others had managed to escape the fire that night, but half his face had been scorched, leaving him disfigured. Look at that thing, tearing through the snow. If we had something like that, we could go out and find real food. We wouldn't have to eat that nasty crap. A heavy-set man beside him spoke up. Second uncle, I know what that is. It's called a snowmobile. An electric one, at that. Huang Tianfang focused on Zhang Yi's snowmobile and said, whatever it is, we need to get our hands on it. Huang Tianfang wasn't alone in his thinking. Everyone watching Zhang Yi had the same idea. After being isolated for over 2 weeks, many were on the verge of madness, and the rest wouldn't be far behind. They needed to get out and find food, find a way to survive. The heavy snow had trapped them. But Zhang Yi's snowmobile had reignited their hope. Zhang Yi could feel the intense greed and barely concealed hostility directed his way, but he touched the pistol at his waist, remembering the weapons he'd found, and felt reassured. Dismounting, Zhang Yi noticed his neighbors at apartment 25 staring at him eagerly. Their eyes were glued to the 2 duffel bags he'd brought back. Zhang Yi smirked, pretending to drive the snowmobile to the underground garage behind the building. Out of sight, he stored the snowmobile in his personal space. Then he left with the 2 bags. The weight of his load left deep footprints in the snow, exciting the neighbors at 25 even more. They were practically hanging out the windows, shouting with joy. Huang Tianfang and his crew watched with hungry eyes. Second uncle, do you think it's food? The heavy-set man asked excitedly. Huang Tianfang snapped, dumbass. He's not going to find a woman out there, is he? The Tianhe gang members around him licked their lips and crowded closer. Is it food? Did he find food out there? Awesome, there's food out there. We're saved. Enough talk, let's go get him. Take everything, including the snowmobile, that the group roared, eyes bloodshot. Huang Tianfang paused, then said coldly, hold on. That kid's probably Zhang Yi, the one who killed Chen Zhenghao. He's dangerous. He took out so many of our guys last time. We need to be careful. I heard he has a gun. If we're going to do this, we have to be smart about it. Huang Tianfang was cautious. Even though the two buildings were close, they were still separated by a few dozen yards. Crossing the thick ice and snow would make them easy targets. So, despite their greed, they held back for now. But while some were calm, others were impulsive. Some of the gang members weren't happy with Huang Tianfang's caution. They talked it over and decided that if they didn't act now, they'd lose their chance once Zhang Yi was back inside. So a few of them snuck downstairs, armed with knives and wrenches. Zhang Yi carried the supplies through the window into the hallway, then pulled out his phone and let Uncle Yu know he was back, asking him to come. Help. Actually, he didn't need to call. Uncle Yu had already heard the snowmobile. Uncle Yu rushed over to meet Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, you actually found this much. Uncle Yu's eyes widened in surprise and admiration at the sight of the two duffel bags. It was snowing hard out there. Anyone else would have been lost. You really needed a professional for this sort of thing. Chapter 83. Kill Me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi said casually, finding supplies out there is a nightmare. I hit every supermarket and mall I could think of around here. Turns out, they'd all been picked clean a long time ago. Empty shelves everywhere. But I didn't give up. I knew you all were counting on me. I figured I'd search the whole damn city if I had to, just to bring back something to eat. Anyway, I finally managed to scrounge up this little bit at a mall way out of the way. Zhang Yi handed the two bags to Uncle Yu, then opened the door for Zhou Kur and led her downstairs. He then sent a message in the group, letting everyone know the food was here. In no time, the neighbors were swarming. The stairwell was packed, every level filled with gaunt, hungry people, all staring greedily at the bags in front of Zhang Yi. Some were practically drooling, ready to make a grab for it. But then they saw the dark iron glint of the gun in Zhang Yi's hand, and they backed off. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes, a small smile playing on his lips. I went through hell to get this stuff for you guys. That he nodded to Zhou Kur to open the bags. Zhou Kur did as she was told, unzipping the bags and dumping the contents onto the ground. Thump. A mountain of food spilled out in front of everyone. Vegetables, meat, bread, crackers. Okay, maybe the quality wasn't exactly top-notch. It was mostly stuff even a dog wouldn't have touched before, but right now, those hungry neighbors were practically green with envy. Uncle Yu pumped his fist in the air and yelled, "Long live Zhang Yi! Long live Zhang Yi!" The others immediately got the message, raising their voices and fists in unison. Long live Zhang Yi! Long live Zhang Yi! Zhang Yi, you're our hero. Bro, from now on, you're my real brother. I owe you everything. They were so desperate, they'd probably crawl on their hands and knees for Zhang Yi if he asked them to. The lure of food was just too strong. In the crowd, Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning were pushing their way to the front. They looked like a mess, hair greasy and tangled, like a couple of escaped lunatics. Seeing all the food Zhang Yi had brought back, Fang Yuqing waved her arms excitedly and shouted, "Zhang Yi, it's me, Qinger." She gazed at the heroic Zhang Yi, her heart swelling with happiness. She was still convinced that Zhang Yi was crazy about her, and that Zhou Kur was just a temporary distraction. With all this food, he was sure to give her extra. Lin Caning clung to her, begging, "Yuqing, we're best friends. Please ask Zhang Yi for extra food for me." Fang Yuqing shot Lin Caning a disgusted look and shoved her away. "Get lost, you leech." The squabble caught Zhang Yi's attention, and he frowned. Someone immediately yelled at them, "Knock it off. Listen to brother Zhang Yi." The people around glared at Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning, and they shut up. Fang Yuqing muttered under her breath, "Why are you being so mean? Don't you know what I am to Zhang Yi?" Seeing that everyone was quiet, Zhang Yi spoke up. "I risked my neck to get this stuff. I wanted to share it with everyone." His tone suddenly turned cold. But these are desperate times, and I'm not feeding freeloaders. If you eat this, you have to be ready to pick up a weapon and fight. Anyone who eats and doesn't work, I promise, I'll make them regret ever taking a bite. Between the gun in Zhang Yi's hand and the food on the ground, everyone nodded, accepting Zhang Yi's offer of carrot and stick. Alright, let's get this food distributed. Zhang Yi was about to start calling out names when two arms suddenly reached out from a fourth-floor window. A few thugs from the Tianhe gang had broken in. When they saw the mountain of food on the ground, their eyes lit up with a terrifying hunger. Hey, Zhao, look at all this food. We hit the jackpot, one of the thugs said excitedly. What are we waiting for? Grab it. The four thugs pulled out their weapons and charged at Zhang Yi. These guys were vicious. They didn't care that they were outnumbered, they knew everyone else was just sheep and that they could take them. Zhang Yi's eyes narrowed, and his first instinct was to pull out his gun and aim, but then he changed his mind. Instead of firing, he backed away, shouting, "The food is yours. Don't let them take it. Kill one of them, and I'll give you enough food for 5 people. Hearing that, the neighbors who had been panicking and trying to escape froze in their tracks. He was right. Zhang Yi had brought that food for them. What would they eat if it was stolen? Food was life. Without it, they'd die, and Zhang Yi had promised to reward them with 5 people's worth of food for every thug they killed. The neighbors looked around. There were dozens of them. What were they afraid of? A few of the younger men gritted their teeth, pulled out steel pipes and kitchen knives, and charged forward. These days, everyone carried a weapon. You never knew when you might need it. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, retreated to the back, pointing his pistol at the crowd to prevent anyone from trying to steal the food during the chaos. The 4 members of the Tianhe gang were caught completely off guard. They had expected these weaklings to run in terror, but instead, they were charging like crazed animals. In seconds, all hell broke loose. There wasn't much space on the 4th-floor landing. Dozens of people were crammed together, and shovels, steel pipes, and kitchen knives clanged and clattered in the confined space. Driven by hunger, everyone was wild-eyed. Plus, the freezing temperature kept them from feeling the pain of their injuries. Thwack! Thwack! People started getting hurt, and blood splattered everywhere, but even as they fell, they kept swinging their weapons. Uncle Yu was leading the charge, roaring like a madman as he swung an iron bar. The 4 Tianhe gang members were tough, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Within 10 seconds, they were on the ground, beaten senseless, afraid that they might still be alive. The mob kept beating them for a long time. The air was filled with screams and shouts. It was an emotional release. They had been living in fear for so long, constantly harassed by the Tianhe gang. Killing those 4 thugs made them feel alive. Their fear of the Tianhe gang had lessened when the fighting stopped. 6 bodies lay on the floor. In addition to the 4 Tianhe gang members, 2 neighbors from the building were dead. Their heads and necks had been slashed with shovels, and they had bled to death on the spot. Seeing the scene, Zhou Ke frowned. As a surgeon, she knew the 2 neighbors might still be saved, but that would require a fully equipped operating room, drugs, and blood transfusions. Zhou Ke's expression quickly hardened. It was possible to save them, but it wasn't worth it. Zhang Yi wasn't going to waste precious resources on them. Chapter 84. Zhang Yi, don't raise waste. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi surveyed his neighbors, a satisfied smirk on his face. Now that they'd killed, these folks were qualified to be his front line, his cannon fodder. It'd make dealing with attacks from other groups way easier down the road, and all it cost him was some junk food and a bunch of empty promises. Alright. Zhang Yi clapped his hands, grinning. That's what I'm talking about. See? As long as we stick together, what do we have to be afraid of? Zhang Yi gestured to the 2 youngest, most eager guys. You 2, get over here. Beaming, the 2 young men rushed over to Zhang Yi, not bothering to wipe the blood off their faces. Zhang Yi reached down, grabbed a pile of food, and shoved it into one guy's arms, and when that wasn't enough, he gave him more. Stale bread, moldy crackers, dehydrated veggies, and a slab of grayish zombie meat. The good stuff. The other neighbors gawked, swallowing hard. wishing they were the ones getting the grub. Zhang Yi loaded them up, then patted them on the back. Keep up the good work. You keep this energy going, and I'll take care of you. The two were practically shaking with excitement. This was enough to last them days. Tears welled in their eyes. It had been so long since they'd eaten anything close to real food. We're with you all the way, brother Zhang Yi. Whatever you say, you're our brother. That the two young men, Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei, yelled at the top of their lungs. They looked at Zhang Yi with pure gratitude in their eyes, and seeing their good fortune, the other neighbors secretly kicked themselves for not trying harder. This was exactly the reaction Zhang Yi had been hoping for. After rewarding the top performers, Zhang Yi announced, "All right, time to divvy up the rest of the food." Single file, people. Zhang Yi had been watching everyone. Those who'd worked hard would get more, those who slacked would get less. Mostly, people got a loaf of bread or a couple of bags of crackers the size of a kid's hand. Zhang Yi had owned dogs before, and he knew a thing or two about them. If you feed a dog too much, it gets lazy and disobedient. The trick is to keep it hungry, but not starving. That way, it's always eager to please. Same went for people. The neighbors were bummed to see how little they were getting, but they didn't dare complain. Zhang Yi had already made an example of a few people. If you weren't getting enough food, you only had yourself to blame for not pulling your weight. Look at Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei, they were feasting. Focus on your own shortcomings, not other people's. Su Hao. Zhang Yi pointed at Su Hao, the rich kid. Su Hao hurried over, holding out his hands. Where's my food? Zhang Yi looked at him with distaste, scuffed the ground with his boot, picked up a single piece of hard candy, and dropped it in his hand. Here's your share. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Even those who got very little felt a surge of relief. Hey, I might not have gotten much, but at least I'm not Su Hao. Su Hao's eyes bugged out. A wave of humiliation washed over him. He exploded. Are you kidding me? One candy. That's it. Zhang Yi sneered. You got the nerve to shout. You were just hanging back the whole time, didn't even lay a finger on those guys. I'm being generous giving you anything at all. Su Hao was slick. He'd run up there yelling, waving his stick, screaming, kill him. Kill him. But his voice was loud, and his feet were dragging, making sure he didn't get close enough to fight. Trying to play Zhang Yi like that, like he was an idiot, Su Hao protested, eyes wide. It's not my fault. There were only 4 of them, and everyone was crowding around. I didn't have a chance, Zhang Yi said, not my problem. I don't care how it happens, I only care about the result. Su Hao was furious. That's not fair. You're being unfair, you're just picking on me. Zhang Yi smiled in contempt. Fair? You think you deserve fair? What are you, a charity case? You think I'm gonna be reasonable with you? I'm giving you orders. You follow them. Got it, trash. Zhang Yi glanced at Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei. What do we do with someone who's disobedient, undisciplined, and doesn't listen? Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei were now Zhang Yi's loyal dogs. At Zhang Yi's signal, the two carefully set their food on the ground, walked over, grabbed Su Hao, and started beating him. Su Hao tried to argue at first, but when a punch landed hard in his stomach, he convulsed. Anyone who still thought they could talk their way out of things in the apocalypse was a fool. You had to teach them with your fists. After a long beating, Zhang Yi told Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei to stop. Just before Su Hao passed out, even though Su Hao was useless, he could still hold a weapon and be used as cannon fodder. Zhang Yi pointed at Su Hao and said to everyone, this is what happens when you disobey the landlord. Don't say I'm a tyrant. I'm actually very fair. If anyone here thinks I'm a tyrant, they can put down their food, walk away with their head held high, and I won't cause them any trouble. Promise. The neighbors glanced at each other, but no one moved. No way, food was their life. Zhang Yi nodded. Good, so we're all in agreement. He walked over to Su Hao, who was curled up like a shrimp and barely conscious from the beating, but his hand was clenched tight. That piece of hard candy might save his life. Zhang Yi's eyes were cold as he stomped on his hand. He was wearing snow boots with hard, thick soles. The stomp tore the flesh right off the back of Su Hao's hand, and blood splattered. Ag. Su Hao screamed in agony and couldn't help but let go. Zhang Yi kicked the candy away and said to Su Hao, whose eyes were wide with despair, "Next time, you better behave. I don't raise trash, got it?" That shut everyone up. They waited obediently for Zhang Yi to distribute the food, no one daring to make a peep. Soon, Zhang Yi had handed out the food. A few were left with nothing. Chapter 85 Humiliation of the White Lotus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Alright, everyone's got their supplies. Zhang Yi had Zhou Ku'er stash the leftovers in his pocket. Just then, a frantic voice cut through the crowd. "Zhang Yi, I didn't get any." "I didn't get anything." That it was Fang Yuqing. She'd always assumed Zhang Yi would give her special treatment, the most food, but she'd waited, and nothing came. Lin Caning, standing beside Fang Yuqing, chimed in, equally anxious. "Hey, Zhang Yi, did you forget about me too?" Zhang Yi looked at them, a smirk playing on his lips. "Nope, didn't forget you too." Their faces lit up, thinking he'd saved them for last for a special reason, but Zhang Yi's next words dashed their hopes. "You two just don't get any." Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning were stunned, staring blankly, as if they couldn't believe their ears. Lin Caning blurted out, "Why? Everyone else got something, why not me?" Fang Yuqing was even more crushed. She pushed her way through the crowd to Zhang Yi, tears welling up as she asked, "Zhang Yi, you're just kidding me, right? You wouldn't do this to me. Didn't you say you liked me?" Zhang Yi crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. "I said I liked you. But you didn't actually believe that, did you? I say that to tons of girls. We're all just hanging out, having fun. Well, I'm over you now, so leave me alone. I already have a girlfriend." He then pulled Zhou Ku'er close. Zhou Ku'er and Fang Yuqing, side by side, were a study in contrasts. One, a top student, graduate of a prestigious university, and a doctor at a major hospital. Beautiful, classy, the total package. The other, an office worker who flirted with guys constantly and hung out at nightclubs. It wasn't a hard choice. Besides, Fang Yuqing was a mess at this moment, hair all over the place. Zhou Ku'er, on the other hand, had perfect makeup and stylish clothes. It was like comparing a fairy to a beggar. Fang Yuqing couldn't handle it. Her beauty, her charm, the things she valued most, were being trampled on by Zhang Yi. Crying, she pointed at him. "No, it's not true. You let me stay at your place a while ago. Why are you doing this now?" Zhang Yi's lips twitched. "What are you talking about? I was just messing with you. Look how pathetic you look now." He immediately turned to Wang Min and Lin Caning. "Hey, did she go around telling you I was crazy about her? And that I'd let her move in?" Wang Min and Lin Caning nodded eagerly. "Yeah, that's right. That girl lives in a fantasy world. She's trash, who knows how many guys she's been with. She even got my cousin killed. She deserves to die." Zhang Yi was publicly humiliating Fang Yuqing, tearing her down. Everyone looked at her with disdain. Fang Yuqing went pale, covering her ears. "No, stop it. Please, stop." Zhang Yi ignored her, continuing, "A woman like you thinks she's a princess, always trying to snag some rich dude. But you don't even realize you're a joke in the rich kid circles of Tianhe City. Everyone knows you'll sleep with anyone for a few bucks." Zhang Yi looked at Su Hao. "Su Hao, tell everyone, what's her nickname?" Su Hao, still huddled on the ground, gritted his teeth and spat out, "The universal adapter, the party bus, Russian roulette." A wave of laughter erupted. "Ha ha ha ha. I can't believe someone like that lived in our building. Man, I used to have a crush on her, what a joke. Guess you could get some for a few bucks. Wish I knew that before. What a shameless skank." The jeers and insults washed over Fang Yuqing, and no matter how hard she tried to block them out, she couldn't escape the sound. She screamed and ran off. Zhang Yi pulled out a small bag of cookies and tossed it in front of Su Hao. Good dog. Here's your reward. Just like training a dog, give him a treat when he's a good boy. Su Hao's eyes widened in delight. He hadn't expected to get his food back. The beating he'd just taken faded into the background. Maybe Zhang Yi wasn't so bad after all, maybe he'd been in the wrong, and shouldn't have resisted Zhang Yi. Thank you, Zhang Yi. I'll be good from now on. At that moment, Lin Caning stood up. Zhang Yi, Fang Yuqing and I had a falling out before, but I'm cool with you, right? I talked to you earlier, are you going to give me extra food? Zhang Yi glanced at her. Nope. Lin Caning's anger flared. Why? You were after her, not me. Zhang Yi looked her in the eye and said flatly, I just don't like you, and I don't want to give you anything. Is that okay? Lin Caning was speechless. You. Zhang Yi continued, I took the supplies back, so I get to decide who gets what. If you don't like it, tough. That's not fair. Lin Caning burst into tears. Life's not fair. Zhang Yi rolled his eyes. Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei quickly ushered Lin Caning away, not wanting her to ruin the mood. After distributing the supplies, Zhang Yi said, next, let's talk about security. Standing beside Uncle Yu, Xia Limei frowned and whispered in his ear, why isn't anyone from our family on the list? You had us kill 2 people, so you should give our 11 family members food. Uncle Yu said, Zhang Yi hasn't forgotten us, don't talk. Xia Limei glared at him, then looked at Zhang Yi, muttering under her breath. Zhang Yi said, in our building, after subtracting the children who can't walk, we have 47 people. I, Zhou Ke, Uncle Yu, and Xia Limei are excluded. That leaves 43 people, divided into 6 groups, each with 7 or 8 people. We'll rotate on duty 24 hours a day to prevent people from other buildings from attacking. If you see someone coming, bang on the railings or other metal objects to alert everyone. The people on the other floors will then use the same method to notify the people on the higher floors. Zhang Yi put his hands in his pockets, his expression serious. The reward I mentioned earlier is still in effect. Kill an enemy and 5 people get extra food. Even if you don't kill anyone, you'll get food for 1 person every day just for being on duty. But other people get to choose first, so you can't be guaranteed a portion. Then, Zhang Yi turned to Uncle Yu. Uncle Yu, you handle the assignments. Uncle Yu nodded. Okay, no problem. Chapter 86. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Zhang Yi finished, the neighbors hung their heads, weighing the options. Someone piped up, hey, Zhang Yi, I get why you and Zhou Ke don't have to pull guard duty. But what's the deal with Uncle Yu? He's the best fighter we've got. Zhang Yi fixed him with a stare, carefully enunciating each word, because Uncle Yu is a key asset. He needs to conserve his energy for when the real fight goes down. Got it, that it was a flimsy excuse, but nobody dared to call him on it. Truth was, Zhang Yi just wanted to keep Uncle Yu safe. Everyone else was going to be on the front lines, basically meet shields against attacks from other buildings, cannon fodder. Or, to put it nicely, expendable resources. But Uncle Yu? He was skilled, decent, and Zhang Yi's best guy. He needed to be kept alive for future use. With the assignments done, Zhang Yi told the neighbors to head home. Only the designated guards stayed near the 4th floor, to attack their building. The 4th floor was the weak spot, whether they tunneled in or climbed through a window, it would be there, so having someone on watch would give them a heads up. Once everyone else was upstairs, Zhang Yi brought Zhou Ke back. He wasn't about to turn his back on people he didn't trust. Now that they were alone, Xia Limei, noticing Zhang Yi hadn't mentioned any food for them, couldn't help but ask, Zhang Yi, did you forget about our share? Zhang Yi looked up, a cold smile flickering in his eyes. Uncle Yu quickly tugged her arm. What are you doing? But Xia Limei persisted. Brother, you did the most work, and you're not giving him anything. That's just. Zhang Yi cut her off. There's more stuff than what I brought out. The junk's for everyone else. The good stuff, I kept back. Uncle Yu, swing by my place later to pick it up. Xie Limei's face instantly brightened. I knew you wouldn't let him work for nothing. Uncle Yu rolled his eyes. I told you, Zhang Yi's a man of his word. Zhang Yi just smiled. Back home, Zhang Yi pulled out a box of instant noodles from his pocket dimension, set it by the door, and told Uncle Yu to come grab it in 10. Inside, he quickly shed his winter gear, *clang, *. A frying pan tumbled from his leather jacket and hit the floor. Zhou Kur picked it up, grinning. I doubt there are even ghosts outside, you're being way too careful. Zhang Yi smiled. Won't need this anymore. He'd found something better, police body armor. Snug and safe, back in his warm apartment, Zhang Yi felt a surge of contentment. Out there, in those sub-zero temperatures, even layered in winter clothes, you could feel the chill, especially riding a motorcycle. He grabbed some grub from his pocket dimension and laid it out on the table. Zhou Kur was starving, too. Before Zhang Yi left, he had cleared out all the food. She'd had nothing to eat either. They sat down and pigged out. So, what's it like out there? Zhou Kur asked. What do you think? The city's snowed in. The low-rises are buried, Zhang Yi said. At this rate, even when it stops snowing and the temperature climbs, it'll take half a month for the snow to melt. Zhou Kur nodded. But it's winter. It's only going to get colder. Not our problem. Zhang Yi said, the real problem is people. In times like these, people are more dangerous than demons. After they finished eating, Zhou Kur snuggled up beside Zhang Yi, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Zhang Yi glanced at her. What's this? Zhou Kur blushed. Just trying to stay warm. She squeezed him, her ample curves doing the work. Ever since she'd gotten enlightened by Zhang Yi, she seemed to have awakened something and clung to him every day. Good thing Zhang Yi was young, strong, and full of energy. An ordinary guy wouldn't be able to handle it. Zhang Yi grinned and playfully slapped her generous butt. I don't have time for that right now. Go take a shower, go back to your room and relax. Zhou Kur winked and obediently headed for the bathroom. So what could tear Zhang Yi away from such a tempting sight? The answer is a universal male hobby. Zhang Yi took all the firearms he'd collected that day from his pocket dimension. He knew a thing or two about guns. After all, he'd joined the Tianhe City Shooting Association and went to the range regularly. The police firearms were naturally a step up from the black market stuff he used to buy, so Zhang Yi ditched his old piece and replaced it with 2 police pistols, fully loaded. Holsters and belts were included, ready to strap on. Then, Zhang Yi started looking at the rifles and the big sniper rifle he'd snagged. The Tianhe City range had rifles for target practice, but no sniper rifles. Luckily, the internet still worked, and it was full of info on firearms. Zhang Yi pulled out his phone and started searching. I can't believe these servers are still running. Guess the big companies have got ways. Zhang Yi was impressed. Lots of internet companies had shut down, and tons of software were offline, but some of the bigger companies were still running their servers, probably in cahoots with whatever was left of the government. For now, humans hadn't given up on rebuilding, and were still holding on to the embers of civilization without hesitation. Zhang Yi started studying the instructions for the firearms online. He picked it up quickly, thanks to his experience. Maybe he couldn't hit a bullseye, but he knew how to load and fire. Worst case, I can just use them to scare people. That's good enough. The presence of firearms was a powerful deterrent. Zhang Yi thought for a second, loaded the magazines, flipped the safeties, and stashed the weapons in his pocket dimension. That way, he could grab one and fire in an emergency. But he couldn't bring himself to put down the sniper rifle. Guns were a guy thing. Most men just loved them. Zhang Yi raised the rifle and peered through the scope at the building across the way. In the building about 50 meters away, he could clearly see into the windows, even the locks. Gotta find a chance to try out this baby. What a weapon. A smile played on Zhang Yi's lips. Head-on fights weren't his style, hiding in a corner and taking someone out when they didn't even know where the shot came from. That was the life. Chapter 87 The Revenge of Tianhe Gang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi was having a blast with his sniper rifle, scoping out the whole community. Since it was nighttime and everyone was without power, the inside of the apartment building was totally dark, but the snow outside reflected enough light to see some vague shapes. Suddenly, Zhang Yi's eyes locked on something. He spotted two small black dots moving near the garage. Garage, huh? They're after my snowmobile, I bet. A smirk crept across Zhang Yi's face. He'd faked putting the snowmobile in the garage earlier that day, and just as he thought, someone was sneaking over at night. Too bad for them, it was a wild goose chase. A little later, Uncle Yu showed up. He saw a whole case of unopened instant noodles by the door, and his eyes welled up with excitement. Wow, Baixiang noodles. Zhang Yi, you're the best. This box would feed the three of them for a week. Uncle Yu was deeply touched that Zhang Yi, who supposedly didn't have much food, would give him so many noodles. Truth be told, Zhang Yi had over 2 cases of these noodles in his storage room and he hadn't even touched a single pack. With all the fancy meals cooked by famous chefs, who needed instant noodles? Uncle Yu picked up the noodles, knocked on the door, and said, Zhang Yi, I grabbed the noodles. Thanks. Zhang Yi put down his rifle, came to the door, and said, Uncle Yu, no need to be so formal. He didn't care about anyone else, but Uncle Yu was essential and had to be taken care of. He was going to be Zhang Yi's gold medal fighter and human shield down the line, not that Zhang Yi was heartless. He wouldn't let Uncle Yu die for him unless it was a last resort. Well, almost a last resort. Uncle Yu scratched his head and grinned. Don't listen to anything Xia Limei said to you today. She's got a big mouth. Zhang Yi lowered his eyes and smiled faintly. Hey, am I gonna argue with a woman? I'm not that petty. But Uncle Yu, are you sure you want to raise another man's kid? Zhang Yi's tone was probing. He wasn't a fan of Xia Limei, but he didn't want things to get awkward with Uncle Yu, so he had to plant the seeds of doubt carefully. Uncle Yu chuckled. Hey, who cares about that these days? I'm lucky to have a woman like her. Zhang Yi nodded. Yeah, that's true. Xia is a good woman, and she can still have kids. I'm not saying anything bad, but I think you sell yourself short, Uncle Yu. In this day and age, a strong, good-at-fighting guy like you is in high demand. Seriously, you could land a celebrity. Uncle Yu was thrilled to hear that. You really think so? Zhang Yi said, look around. Those skinny guys who sing and dance can't even take care of themselves. It's guys like us who give women a sense of security. Then, Zhang Yi changed the subject. But hey, Xia is a catch. You keep working hard, and maybe she'll give you a kid someday. After all, a man needs his own kids. Raising another man's kid is, well, you know. Uncle Yu felt a twinge of discomfort. What Zhang Yi said stirred up some thoughts. He really liked Xia Limei. She was curvy, skilled, and satisfied him, but that baby of hers was less than a year old, and a real burden in this new world. Uncle Yu was often woken up in the middle of the night to take care of her, so he never got enough rest. It would be fine if it were his own kid, but it wasn't. People were selfish, after all. Uncle Yu had been feeling resentful for a while, but he pushed it aside and tried not to dwell on it. Besides, Xia Limei kept brainwashing him, telling him to treat the child as his own daughter, and when she grew up, she would be grateful. Eventually, Uncle Yu had honestly been raising someone else's kid. Zhang Yi's words woke him up and made him reconsider. I'm not even thinking about having kids right now. I'll think about it after things settle down. Uncle Yu suppressed his unease and said with a forced smile. That's right, that's right. I'm just talking, Uncle Yu, don't worry about it. I respect you and Xia a lot, and I hope you guys will be happy. Uncle Yu nodded. I'm gonna head back. Call me if you need anything. After Uncle Yu left, Zhang Yi reloaded his rifle and stashed it in his dimension. These guns would be his secret weapons. Soon after, the sound of water in the bathroom stopped. Zhou Kuer came out wrapped in a towel, her milky skin peeking out. Her long, toned legs had elegant lines, radiating a seductive glow in the light. Zhang Yi was sprawled out on the sofa, and said lazily, I'm a little tired today, you do the work. Zhou Kuer looked at Zhang Yi on the sofa, hesitating slightly. He had been out running all day, and he must have been sweating. He hadn't even showered, but she didn't complain. She simply came over obediently and knelt down on the floor. That night, the Tianhe gang, having lost 4 members, launched another attack on Building 25. Their recent successes had made them underestimate everyone in the building besides Zhang Yi, but this time, they were met with resistance. The team was led by Huang Tianfang's nephew, Huang Wei, who was good at sneaking around at night. Around 2 in the morning, he led 8 guys into Building 25 in the dark, but as soon as they reached the stairs, bricks started raining down on them. Clang, clang, clang. That the people on duty had spotted the enemy and immediately counterattacked with whatever they could find, wielding kitchen knives, sticks, and anything else they could get their hands on. They blocked the Tianhe gang from above, pelting them with stones, bricks, and random heavy objects to buy time while fighting. They banged on the stairs and windows to make noise and wake up the neighbors. Soon, the entire building was awake. Huang Wei and his guys were eager for revenge and desperate for supplies, so they pressed their attack. But they were too few, and even with their skills, they couldn't take on so many people. Plus, Zhang Yi's reward meant that one of their lives was worth 5 people's food. The neighbors were fighting tooth and nail, like chickens with their heads cut off. The battle lasted only a few minutes, and everyone was exhausted. 3 bodies lay at the scene. Seeing the situation turning bad, Huang Wei and his crew quickly shouted, "Retreat, let's go." As soon as they ran, the neighbors from Building 25, elated, chased after them, screaming. One worker, slow on his feet, was slashed with a kitchen knife before he could climb out the window, the knife sinking halfway into his back. He screamed and struggled to wriggle out. Once they were outside, the neighbors didn't dare chase any further. After all, it was late, and they didn't know what was waiting for them out there. But Zhang Yi had been woken up by the commotion. He came to the balcony, looked at the fleeing members of the Tianhe gang, and an idea struck him. At this distance, could I take them out with my sniper rifle? Chapter 88. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When a guy sees a beautiful woman, his first instinct is to connect with her. Same thing when you snag a sweet weapon, you just gotta test it out. It's ingrained in me. Even as a kid, if I found a good stick, I'd pretend it was a sword. But Zhang Yi wasn't messing with a stick. He had a sniper rifle, something unheard of in China, let alone using it to take down some punks. Time to see what this baby can do. Zhang Yi pulled the sniper rifle from his interdimensional space, walked onto his 24th floor balcony, and started aiming. That 24x scope was no joke. From way up there, those dudes looked like ants, but now they were crystal clear. Zhang Yi held his breath, not wanting to fog up the lens. The 7 goons were trudging back through the snow, making them easy targets. He fought back the excitement, lined up his crosshairs on one guy's back, and squeezed the trigger. For some reason, the moment the bullet left the chamber, he had this crazy feeling, it was gonna hit. Boom! The gunshot echoed in the still night. It probably woke half the neighborhood from their nervous sleep. Through the scope, Zhang Yi watched the guy drop, blood staining the white snow crimson. Holy crap, am I a marksman all of a sudden? Am I some kind of savant? Zhang Yi was shocked and stoked. He was just trying to see if the gun worked, didn't expect anything like this, but it felt right, like he was born for it. What was that weird feeling just now? He was a little baffled, but no time to dwell on it. The others heard the shot, saw their buddy go down, and started hauling ass. Zhang Yi quickly reloaded and aimed at the next one. That same crazy feeling washed over him as he locked on. Boom! Another gunshot, another body. This time, Zhang Yi knew it wasn't luck. He wasn't just nailing shots from the 24th floor. He had a gift. Or, more accurately, some kind of special ability. Zhang Yi muttered to himself, guess my power's not just the pocket dimension. I just never tapped into this before. Whatever it was, it had to be connected to space. It made him a natural sniper. He'd used crossbows and pistols before, mostly close range, but he never noticed this feeling. He just figured he had good instincts, but with the sniper rifle, it was unmistakable. Zhang Yi's heart raced. In the apocalypse, one more skill could be the difference between life and death. He reloaded and raised the gun again, this time aiming for the head. Boom! The shot rang out, and the guy's head exploded in a cloud of blood and bone fragments. Confirmed, he definitely had a powerful ability for pinpoint accuracy. Zhang Yi was beyond hyped. From now on, he could be a shadowy killer, taking out targets from afar. Downstairs, neighbors heard the gunshots and watched Huang Wei's crew drop like flies. Their eyes went wide with terror. The shot came from upstairs. Has to be Zhang Yi. That's no pistol. That's gotta be a sniper rifle. Damn, he's taking them out from way up there. Zhang Yi's a dead-eye. That everyone was speechless, and more than a little scared. If Zhang Yi could do that, killing them would be like swatting flies. They all jumped to the same conclusion. Zhang Yi must have been a special ops soldier undercover. How else could he be such a good shot? Guess we better listen to Zhang Yi from now on. Yeah, we're only alive because he's been holding back. People's imaginations ran wild, and their respect for Zhang Yi skyrocketed. And it wasn't just them. The midnight gunshots woke the entire community. Zhang Yi's rifle didn't have a suppressor, and anyone who knew guns knew that wasn't a pistol. In a world where a pistol could make you king of a building, a rifle or even a sniper rifle was terrifying. Zhang Yi put away the sniper rifle and rubbed his shoulders. All that shooting had made him sore. Good thing he was in shape, or he'd be feeling it for days. That night, a lot of people probably weren't getting back to sleep. Uncle Yu texted Zhang Yi, asking if that was him shooting. Uncle Yu had been in the army, so he knew it was a sniper rifle right away. Zhang Yi didn't try to hide it. Found it at the police station today. Uncle Yu asked, were you in the army? What was your unit? Zhang Yi was too good. In Uncle Yu's eyes, he was a top-tier shooter. Zhang Yi just laughed. Just a natural. Uncle Yu figured Zhang Yi didn't want to talk about it, so he dropped it. Good thing it was you shooting. If it was someone else, we'd be in trouble. Zhang Yi chatted with him for a bit, then went back to his warm bed and passed out. He slept until after 9, got up, washed, and let Zhou Kur out of her room. Let's eat. I want something you made. How about some fried noodles, 2 bowls? Zhang Yi told Zhou Kur. She smiled. I can't make them as good as the restaurant. Zhang Yi shrugged. Then practice. We've got plenty of time. He'd been eating restaurant food for too long. He wanted something home-cooked for a change. Zhou Kur went into the kitchen and, after a while, brought out 2 bowls of noodles. Zhang Yi took a bite. Not bad. He'd installed cameras all over the house, including the kitchen. He also supplied the ingredients, and on Zhou Kur's first day, Zhang Yi had searched her from head to toe. He still checked her every day, inside and out, leaving no stone unturned. He wasn't taking any chances. He had to make sure she couldn't poison him, otherwise, he wouldn't touch her food. Sitting at the table, Zhou Kur asked, I heard gunshots last night. Were you shooting from the balcony? Chapter 89 Warehouse District. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi glanced at her, a smile playing on his lips. Yep. He took a bite of the noodles. Zhou Kur's cooking wasn't anything special, but hey, noodles are pretty basic. Ran into him while I was out. Sniper. Zhang Yi's tone was casual. Zhou Kur's eyes lit up. A sniper? You know how to use one? Not only do I know how, I'm pretty damn good at it. Zhang Yi gestured towards the window. Dropped 7 guys with 7 shots last night. He was a little proud of himself. Guys like to show off their kills. Zhou Kur looked at him with newfound admiration. Being around a guy like that definitely boosted her chances of survival. Zhang Yi, you're amazing. She propped her chin on her hands, gazing at him adoringly. Hey, aren't you even a little curious how I know how to use a sniper rifle? Zhang Yi asked, smirking. Zhou Kur shook her head. What's it to me? Even if you used to be a murderer or some kind of freak. I'm rolling with you now. Beats dying out there, right? She added after a moment's thought. Zhang Yi nodded. You're a sharp cookie, unlike some of these dimwits who gotta know every little thing. Meanwhile, over at Building 26, the Tianhe gang was having a rough morning. Huang Tianfang didn't find the bodies of Huang Wei and his crew until daylight. He'd heard the gunshots the night before and knew something was up. But, playing it safe, he hadn't dared send anyone out to investigate. Deep down, though, he knew Huang Wei and the others weren't coming back. Seeing the 10 corpses piled up outside in the morning made his blood run cold. A surge of anger hit him, but the fear in his gut was 10 times stronger. Now, their whole crew was down to just 9 members, and their fighting strength had taken a major hit. Even if they forced the remaining tenants to join up, it wouldn't make up for the loss of those guys' skills. If a fight with another building broke out right now, they'd be screwed. They've got guns, and not just any guns. I'm betting rifles or even a sniper rifle. Huang Tianfang said grimly. And the way they were spraying bullets last night, they must have a ton of ammo. This is gonna be tough, he muttered, his face etched with worry. His crew looked just as scared. Boss, what do we do? Dawei and the others are gone. We've lost half our people. Are we still doing this? Huang Tian shot a nasty look towards Building 25. Gritting his teeth, he spat, damn it. What are we supposed to do? They have guns. His guys started to panic. But if we don't steal their snowmobile and supplies, we're not going to have enough food for more than a few days. Huang Tianfang was silent for a moment, then said gravely, tonight, we go and steal Dawei's body back. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They'd been through thick and thin together for years. And now this? They all felt terrible, but no one said a word. Survival trumps everything. Back in Zhang Yi's apartment, after breakfast, he stood up. I'm heading out. Zhou Qi heard this and quickly stuffed a bag of chips into her pocket. Zhang Yi didn't say anything, but this time he left the 2 boxes of food supplies in the kitchen. He had faith in Zhou Qi's intelligence. Unless she found a better meal ticket than him, she wouldn't do anything stupid like betray him. When Zhang Yi went downstairs, the guys on guard straightened up the moment they saw him. Brother Zhang, going out. Zhang Yi glanced at them, seeing the respect in their eyes. He had definitely earned their admiration. He nodded. Keep up the good work. He climbed out the 4th floor window. After a moment's thought, he made a show of heading around back toward the garage. Soon after, he was roaring off on his motorcycle, leaving the community behind. Figures appeared at windows in numerous buildings, watching Zhang Yi disappear. Their expressions were a mix of excitement, envy, and even hostility. Over at Building 21, the serious gang was running the show. They were a bunch of young guys in their 20s. The gang's leader, Wang Chang, stood at the window, gripping a rusty machete. He watched Zhang Yi leave and frowned. Where is his motorcycle hidden? He'd been the one who ordered someone to steal Zhang Yi's bike the night before. His second-in-command, Xiao Lu, replied, the area's pretty big, and he's got it stashed good. It's tough to find. Wang Chang scoffed, crossing his arms. We gotta get our hands on that bike, no matter what. With that snowmobile, we can go out and find supplies. We could build up the crew and run this whole place. Xiao Lu nodded, his eyes gleaming. Right on. These are crazy times, and this is our chance. He stared in the direction Zhang Yi had gone, his eyes bloodshot. Now, let's figure out how to score some smokes. I haven't had a cigarette in half a month, and I'm going nuts. In other buildings, people were busy talking about Zhang Yi. He was both a threat and an opportunity. The threat, he had a gun, a big one. The opportunity, he had a snowmobile and could go out scavenging for supplies. Some were planning to fight him, some to team up with him, but one thing was clear, they were all going to cross paths with Zhang Yi soon. It was inevitable. Zhang Yi headed to a nearby supermarket first, but unfortunately, the buildings weren't tall enough. The smaller ones, being only 1 floor, were buried under the snow. Looks like the only places to find supplies are those few big supermarkets and warehouses, he said to himself. He suddenly remembered the industrial park where he used to work. Southwest of the economic development zone, there was a large area that had been developed with factories and warehouses. The land was cheap, so most of the city's warehouses were located there. Zhang Yi had already emptied Walmart's warehouse, but there were still goods from other companies there, like medical supplies, food, cars, toys, and all kinds of stuff. Gotta check it out. Maybe I'll find something useful. With his mind made up, Zhang Yi turned his motorcycle around and headed towards the warehouse district. The warehouses were only about 6 miles away, and he arrived in less than 10 minutes. It was pretty deserted, and the warehouses were relatively tall, so they weren't completely buried like the buildings in the city. He could still see the tops of some of the structures. Chapter 90 Gas Station. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi knew this area like the back of his hand. All the warehouses in Tianhe city, belonging to hundreds of companies both big and small, were crammed together here. If he could haul all that stuff back, he could feed thousands of people, easy, not just himself. The big question was there anything left to haul? Zhang Yi pulled out a pistol and a crowbar, then headed for the RT-Mart warehouse to scout things out. He jammed the crowbar in at the top of a window and smashed it open. Peeking inside, he saw the massive building was completely empty. Cleaned out, huh? Zhang Yi had been expecting it, so he wasn't surprised. He moved on to other warehouses, finding the same thing: medical supplies, household goods, food, even snacks and pet food, all gone. Just like I figured. When disaster strikes, the official channels will report the situation ASAP. The bigwigs would have definitely moved all the goods. That's why Zhang Yi had wanted to clear out the Walmart warehouse a week ahead of time. He knew that when things went south, the VIPs would look after their own first and wouldn't give a damn about ordinary folks. Still, Zhang Yi kept looking. There were hundreds of warehouses here. Maybe something got overlooked. Maybe he'd get lucky. Finally, his persistence paid off. After a while, Zhang Yi stumbled across a car storage warehouse. The place was huge, millions of square feet. Cars were stacked on steel racks, packed in like sardines. Tons of luxury cars here, worth millions before the world went to hell. Now, they were completely useless. He couldn't think of a single practical use for them. Seeing so many cars, Zhang Yi was underwhelmed. He hesitated, debated with himself, and finally said, "What the hell, I've got plenty of room in my dimension. I'll just toss them in. Might need them later, who knows." Guys always love cars. Seeing all these expensive rides, Zhang Yi figured he'd collect them for kicks. Couldn't drive them now, but he could still admire them. Consider it like having a bunch of fancy model cars. So, he grabbed a dozen of his favorites and stashed them in his personal dimension. The next day, Zhang Yi was back at it in the warehouse district. Most warehouses were empty. What was left was stuff that was too big to move: giant machines, building supplies, that kind of thing. He didn't find a single thing that could be eaten or used. Zhang Yi gritted his teeth, fought his reluctance, and started grabbing whatever he could find: heavy-duty trucks, excavators, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, bulldozers. What if I need it later? That's what Zhang Yi kept telling himself. Then he realized how ridiculous he sounded. In a world of ice and snow, these cars won't even move an inch. What good are they? Luckily, his dimension was big enough to hold it all. After working for hours, Zhang Yi decided he'd done enough. There was nothing more to find here, and he wasn't in desperate need of anything else right now. He pulled out a chocolate bar from his dimension and quickly ate it. The cold wind blasting into his mouth made it a little unpleasant. Hot water was out of the question. It would cool off in seconds. Zhang Yi grabbed a mouthful of snow from the ground and chewed it, just to get some water. Then, it hit him. He needed to go somewhere. Now that he had all these cars, he needed to think about gas and diesel. He already had some gas and diesel in his dimension. That was enough for everyday use, but with the current situation, snowmobiles would probably be his main mode of transportation. In that case, his supply might not last. Just to be safe, Zhang Yi decided to check out the gas stations to see if he could stock up. Zhang Yi hopped on a snowmobile, thought for a second, and headed for the biggest gas station in Tianhe city. Before long, he was at the spot he remembered, but when he got there, all he could do was exhale a long plume of white vapor. The entire gas station was buried under snow. Zhang Yi could only guess where it was based on the surrounding buildings. He had braced himself for this, but he was still a little bummed out. Gas stations aren't exactly skyscrapers. I can't even find a place to refuel now. Damn it, Zhang Yi frowned, feeling helpless. With this much ice and snow, digging by hand was pretty much impossible, and who knew how long this storm would last. Would he have to ration fuel? Between what he had stored in his dimension and the snowmobile's fuel consumption, he might only have 20 years' worth. That was not good news. Manpower just isn't cutting it. If only I had some heavy machinery to dig with. Zhang Yi smiled, feeling foolish. He was about to turn the key and leave when he suddenly had an idea. Excavation equipment? Wait, what about the excavator? That he had picked up some construction vehicles from the warehouse, including a few excavators. He just grabbed them on a whim, hoping he'd find a use for them later. Looks like later was now. Digging through the snow with an excavator would be a piece of cake. Honestly, it was a pretty crazy idea. After all, ice and snow this deep were pretty rare. It's not like you see people driving excavators at the North Pole. They use icebreakers, but after thinking about it, Zhang Yi thought it could actually work. The snow hadn't been piling up for more than a month, so the ice layer couldn't be too hard yet. An excavator could handle it. The snow was only a few dozen feet deep at most, and once he dug down to the doors and windows, he could just smash them open. It wouldn't take long. I can do this. Zhang Yi wasted no time and summoned a large excavator from his dimension. Boom, the excavator, weighing nearly 40 tons, crashed onto the ground and sank a few feet. Seeing this, Zhang Yi smiled and said, "Perfect. Saves me the trouble of digging down." The surface snow was too thin to support that kind of weight, but the snow underneath should be packed in more tightly. It was Zhang Yi's first time driving an excavator, but it wasn't too hard. He'd driven cranes, forklifts, and big trucks back in the day. This thing wasn't too different. After a little thought, he figured it out. He might not be an expert, but he could operate it. Chapter 91 found a new way out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The excavator was pretty simple to operate, basically two push handles and a lever to control the bucket. Zhang Yi located the fuel tank and poured in diesel from his dimension, then he hopped into the cab and turned the key. Boom. Luckily, the cold didn't mess with the new machine too much, and the excavator started right up. Zhang Yi started moving snow, pushing it to the sides. He was slow at first but gradually picked up speed. After about half an hour, he had dug a 10-foot pit, and the tracks could move along. Good thing this thing had tracks and not wheels. Zhang Yi even figured he could use it as a transport vehicle in a pinch. It'd be slow, but those tracks could handle the snow, no problem. It could probably crush its way through a mud pit too. Amazing. Using his beginner skills, Zhang Yi worked for almost 2 hours, finally digging down to a solid structure. Stoked, he started throwing the remaining snow over the side. Then he finally saw the massive roof of the gas station. Finding the station was the easy part. Now he just had to clear the rest of the snow around it. His lack of experience meant it took another 4 or 5 hours to dig down to the gas station's convenience store window. Good thing the excavator did the digging, not him, or he'd be dead tired. Zhang Yi got off the excavator and teleported it back to his dimension. Then he smashed the window and jumped inside. He was surprised by what he saw in the convenience store. Snow had forced its way in through the door, filling most of the space. At least he could still see the back door. Zhang Yi waded through the snow. He needed to find the oil storage first. Gas station tanks were usually underground, which protected them from getting buried in snow. It didn't take him long to find the entrance. The gas station was large, but the space behind it was small, so the entrance was easy to spot. Zhang Yi used a crowbar to pry open the iron door and turned on his headlamp. The sight in front of him made him gasp. Four massive tanks sat in the storage room, holding almost 50,000 gallons of fuel. It was quite a sight. Zhang Yi stepped outside for a moment and discharged any static electricity before going back in. The station was closed and dark inside. Zhang Yi used his headlamp to check the pipes. They were wrapped in layers of plastic to prevent leakage. Then he carefully put those 4 tanks into his dimension. With 3 tanks of gas and 1 of diesel, he wouldn't need to worry about fuel for a long time. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Zhang Yi realized something important. If I can use the excavator to dig through snow, couldn't I use it to dig anywhere else that's buried? The whole world is a giant treasure chest. My own personal treasure chest. Zhang Yi's mind raced. He was ecstatic, all sorts of valuable things were buried under the snow. Good stuff, all good stuff. Zhang Yi felt a surge of confidence. He wouldn't have to worry about supplies anymore, the whole world was his to use. Zhang Yi climbed back up the tracks left by the excavator and hopped on his snowmobile. It was getting late, time to call it a day. He went to the supermarket in the mall, bought 2 bags of junk food, and headed back. As soon as the motorcycle appeared outside the building, everyone was at their windows, watching him. Zhang Yi parked the car behind the building, faked putting it in the garage, and returned to his apartment with the bags of food. His neighbors were already waiting for him. Fan Yuqing wasn't there this time. Apparently she'd realized she wouldn't get any more food from him, but Lin Caning didn't give up, and was still planning to try her luck. Zhang Yi ignored her. Everyone worked hard against those invaders yesterday. This food is your reward. We'll distribute it according to the rules. He handed out the food based on everyone's contribution. There wasn't much to go around, so some got more, some got less. Those who slacked off wouldn't get much to eat. After the sniper rifle incident, everyone was even more intimidated by Zhang Yi and didn't dare say anything. Besides, they knew Zhang Yi had killed the most enemies. Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei hadn't been on duty the night before, so they only got a one-person serving, which meant they wouldn't get enough to eat. They looked disappointed. Li Qingbin said to Zhang Yi, "Brother Zhang, we're just waiting for them to come to us. Who knows how long that'll take? You took out over a dozen of them, I doubt they'll come back. How are we gonna get rewarded?" Young guys got impatient fast. Zhang Yi touched his nose and smiled. Opportunities are for those who are prepared. I said I'd reward you with food for 5 people for every enemy you kill. I didn't say you had to wait for them to attack. Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei's eyes lit up. You mean, we can go on the offensive? If we kill people in other buildings, can we trade them in for rewards? They were pumped. They were desperate for food and eager to prove themselves. They wanted to show their strength and become Zhang Yi's right-hand men. Zhang Yi considered it. So far, besides the Tianhe gang in Building 26, no one had attacked Building 25, but no one knew what the future held, especially now that Zhang Yi had shown off his snowmobile. More people would be interested in him. Zhang Yi liked where Jiang Lei and Li Qingbin were going with this. He had recruited these guys to be cannon fodder. If they wanted to throw their lives away, so be it. After all, this junk food wasn't worth much to Zhang Yi. He smiled, nodded, and said, "Of course. Everyone outside is an enemy, killing them ensures our safety. No matter which building it is, anyone who isn't from our building is fair game, and you can trade them in for rewards." Because of the temperature and snow outside, they could only attack nearby buildings, which meant Building 26 and the Tianhe gang were first on the list. Li Qingbin and Jiang Lei cheered. The others had mixed reactions, but it was clear some of them were into it. After all, who didn't want more food?